but the moderator in the background is responsible for that, I think.
What, Sander?
I think he's fixing the Facebook stream now.
Yeah, he does.
Okay. I can't believe Lucy's become a dad again. That's yeah.
Yeah, well, he announced it last week, didn't he?
No, what? When?
When we chatted, I think.
What? When? Really? Oh.
Yeah, I believe he mentioned it.
All right.
Hey, yo, we hebben nog steeds dat startscreen. Ja, oké.
Knob Twiddlers Hangout.
There we are.
Awesome.
I think we all look and sound good, right?
Yep, nice
think so
colours.
too.
Yep, looks good.
You know.
Good.
Yeah.
How's everyone doing?
Good.
Yeah, good.
Sam here,
Good.
doing well.
Yeah.
Working on a lot of new stuff, and decided to explore some of my sins that I hadn't touched in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
that's
that's good.
all going nice.
That is quite a good thing about being in isolation, I guess. You know, you get to do all these things that you forgot about or didn't have time for
Mm-hmm.
all this time.
Mm. Yeah, especially checking out equipment, really, because it's, you know, it takes time really to really get to know something, and you know, when do you really have the proper time to do that? So there's no excuse.
Exactly.
There's no excuse now.
Usually for touring artists, I guess it's like you know, touring in the weekend and, you know, being with family, or, you know, catching up on other things Monday. Maybe go to the studio on Tuesday, you know, went through Wednesday or whatever, and then by the time you get something going, it's Thursday night, and you have to go. You have to prepare for the weekend again.
Yeah.
Do you take time off? Do you take time off, especially to create space for studio work or other things, or you just go on the road every weekend?
Who me?
Or anyone?
Sometimes I try to plan things in if I have a special project coming up. Like as you know, Jochem, a while ago I did a 5.1 surround set on a festival in Germany, and I really took some time off to prepare for that. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, first of all, you guys are lucky because you're all stuck where your studios are. I got stuck back in Georgia, so it's been hard to get access to making music even. So it's quite difficult. And then, and on top of it, we had like this lockdown, and we didn't have access to cars, so I couldn't even really get to like friends' studios as well. So you're lucky that you have access to all of your stuff there.
Yeah, you're in Tbilisi.
Yes. Yeah, I'm from here, so I was only meant to be here for like a couple of weeks now. But you know, you get creative with it. You use what you can. Kind of sometimes limiting your setup is nice because you work with what you have. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, it's a bit luck, isn't it? Because we could have all been stuck in. I guess. Well, certainly for me, I could have been stuck in a lot worse a place than I am now. Like in a hotel, you know, which would have been particularly bad. So yeah, I mean, I think it is just sort of making use of your head and time, isn't it? Really, because
true.
It's actually worse to have. I think it's worse to have more time to do things. I think it's we're not used to it. We weren't used to it before. We weren't used to having so much time, and maybe that's maybe it was too much of a shock to have so much time.
Yeah, you mean like sometimes good things come out of the time restrictions you have, or is that what you mean? Having a time limit pushes you to get something done.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think we really got used to, as a kind of as a human race, we for better or worse, we kind of got used to that rolling pressure almost of having no time and just kind of, making the best of it, and then suddenly you have just bags of time, and at first it seems amazing, but then I've found that it took a good 3 weeks before I kind of knew what I wanted to do with that time properly, So it's quite interesting, actually. I think the whole process, the psychological process of this whole meltdown, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
what I've seen is that a lot of people who are now stuck at home in the studios somehow think that they really need to create a lot of stuff now because they are at home all the time. But I also think you cannot necessarily force that, to start creating a lot of stuff now. I mean, what I'm experiencing, I have days here, that I'm really in a nice mood for creating, and a lot of stuff happens. But I also have days here that that I'm not creating anything at all, and I think that's fine as well.
I said for me it works both ways. If there is a time restriction on a project, it can definitely help getting things done, because you are kind of especially when you do collaborations, you kind of owe it to the other person to get something out of it, or if you work on something and spend time together, it's you can't just sit around and watch movies or listen to music. You basically get your hands dirty and get something done. But on the other hand, having no deadlines and no real schedule to do something can also result in just experimenting and meandering through all kinds of thoughts and ideas until you stumble upon something that you would never have done when you had a time restriction. So it's I think there's two sides of it, I think.
I mean, maybe this creatively, I think this is whatever happens, but creatively I think it's actually quite interesting, to be thrown into a different world for months, really. I mean, and no one really knows what's coming out the other side.
What will result.
I mean, working as a musician or making music or being an artist in general is always about problem solving. I mean, just going into a studio is in fact a problem solving job. You have this.
You're right.
Thing. True. You have this thing in mind. But you never end up doing what you had in mind exactly. It's always something that you set out to do, and you might get the aesthetic in the end, but never really like some like there's also I mean, you can get melodies in your head, of course, but the way it's going to sound, the way it's going to turn out, how a track or a piece of music is actually going to work or communicate is something you can never have in your mind exactly. It's always you start with this idea, and then you solve problems until you get to an acceptable version or an acceptable incarnation or whatever, or of what you were setting out to do. But it's never the exact thing, right? I don't know. I mean, at least for me, I don't know.
Not usually. No. No. But that's kind of the beauty in it, isn't it? It's you can never really pin anything down. You never really own it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it wasn't Eno or Bowie who said, a piece of music is basically when the artist said they are temporarily satisfied. It's like, okay, this is the
You've
as far as
been
I
brushing
can.
up on you've been brushing up on that, haven't you?
No. I was referring to this because last week we spoke.
Yeah.
Eno was a subject that kind of.
We did tickle Eno's eyebrows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but it's. I mean, that's just the way it goes. I mean, you can.
Yeah.
I mean, the best way to be productive is really just to go into the studio and start doing stuff. Whatever it is.
Yep.
Because at some point you stumble upon something which tickles your brain and sucks you in, and one thing leads to the other and everything.
Yeah, I feel, Robin, that's a really strong point. Just sort of this following a more natural intuition, and I guess it's quite difficult because when you're constantly in the momentum, there's always this expectation. But like you said, Luke, just sort of letting go and just allowing things to pace themselves. Like sometimes you don't have to be pressured, and that's okay to allow yourself to have gaps in between so that you can actually create what it is you want to be creating, because there's always this sort of constant pressure, and for once we have time to allow that to not happen. And I've been sensing a sort of like, I guess, like you said, Robin, a sort of attention deficit, or like this need to create, and I think it's kind of counterintuitive, right, to like a natural process where you sort of should be doing it not for any other motive but for yourself, I guess.
Yeah Correct.
Yeah. I mean, thinking about it, rightly or wrongly, I think what I used to do before this was, it was very much a case of making myself do what needs to be done in a very short period of time, because I only had a short period of time. So there was no room for like, oh, that's interesting. I think I'll go off on that tangent. It was very much a case of this, don't get sidetracked on this, kind of straight ahead. And that actually works quite well. But, so yeah, that I got used to that, I think. Yeah. Got used to that kind of, if you, like you were saying, Joachim, you're saying, if you don't go and do it, nothing really gets done. You have to kind of be very direct-minded on the thing you set out to do, whether or not it turns out how you want. But if you get sidetracked on that, then generally, you don't really you finish what you started because there's not enough time.
Yeah, okay, but I'm not necessarily talking about that kind of productiveness. I'm also talking about learning, finding things out about the gear. I mean, like I see this massive Colossus machine standing behind you. Do you just? Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing piece of gear. I've never touched it, but I mean, you can tell by the way it looks. It's just a magnificent thing to work with. But I mean, there must be time you dedicate to exploring this thing without even expecting a result out of it, right? I mean, that's the kind of studio work I'm talking about when you are producing, or when you're making music, or when you're busy in the studio, in downtime, in times like this, that's a perfect opportunity to really sit down, like an entire afternoon, for example, and just explore, the hell out of it.
Yeah, which is exactly what I've been doing, because I got that just before the lockdown. Now, I kind of already thought if I'd got that, but the lockdown didn't happen, I wouldn't know as much about how that works and what I can do with that if it hadn't happened. That would be like 3 years from now, because I just wouldn't have. Honestly, So,
Yeah, because many sins are like sort of a world in itself, and I think there's especially in a machine like that, but also what I was referring to, I have a little synth that I'm exploring again now, and I'm finding all kinds of little new features that I know very well that I will use in the future for new music that I probably didn't find if I didn't have all this downtime now.
Yeah.
Have you actually? Sorry, Sophia. Have you actually got to the? Have you actually made anything from learning? Have you made anything learning what the new things you've learned?
I'm still in the experimentation phase now. Yeah. But I think in the next few weeks, I have several ideas now that I really want to put it to use.
Put them to bed.
Absolutely. Huh?
Put them to bed.
Yeah. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I was just going to say also just the idea of exploring other formats as well, you know, because I mean, at least for me, I feel like using other media outlets has always just circled back to music, you know, in a way. It's always inspired me. So I feel like exploring sound in different ways, you know, I've seen some artists make like sample packs, for example, or like just exploring sound design further. Like I'm working on the sort of like sound installation piece with like a visual component. I feel like in a way it just kind of challenges you and just motivates you to kind of come back to your own music and look at it from a different perspective. And you don't really get time for that normally, you know, because you're always sort of strictly musically driven, so, or track driven, I guess.
Yeah. So, yeah. Sorry, go on.
No, go on, man.
Yeah. So anybody has. I'm just curious because that's always on my mind. You know, what's your the latest piece of kit that you are really into exploring at the moment? I mean, for you, Luke, it's obviously the Colossus. What about you?
It's that thing, yeah.
Yeah.
What I said. This is the thing that I'm exploring again now.
Is that a Tansy bar?
No, that's a Rosbox.
Ah, right. Okay.
And it has a thing here. If you see here, this is like you have a bit rate that you can adjust from 16 till like 0 or 1 bit. And it has anti-aliasing on the filter and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm, what I've been re-exploring again lately.
What is it? Is it a synth or is it a...
Yeah, it's a monophonic synth, 3 oscillators, but also every oscillator also has a wavetable function, so you can mix 3 different wavetables. It has a digital and analog filter in it, and it's been made by a little company from Germany, and I think he made about 150 or something. And I have it for quite a long time now, and I just sort of rediscovered it. So yeah.
Yeah, you took it to my studio when we were collaborating. I remember, and it's one of these machines that it's one of these machines that if you connect it and start playing around with it, you get instant results. And what I really liked about this one is that the range of sound you can get out of it is absolutely phenomenal. It's crazy. It's from the harshest crazy stuff to really delicate melodic stuff to and obviously also the glitchy stuff because that's what it's designed for. Yeah. But it's amazing. It's a really amazing piece of kit.
Well, the funny thing is when you started playing with it, you got the sounds you got out of it were like very different than what I got out of it. But that's also because you said you wanted to explore, like how you wanted to explore the limits in a way.
Yeah, that's usually what I do when I get my hands on something new. I just see how far I can push it. See where the edges are. Just to get an idea of what it's capable of, not necessarily to get something useful out of it, but just to see where the limits are, where the how big the range is of an instrument, just to get to know it,
Yeah.
Well, it's a bit like when you drive a car for the first time. You want to take it round the corners, see where it how it handles, man. You know.
Yeah.
Because all the
it's cutting up.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I think there's a bit of a delay as well, so kind of cross paths.
There is a bit of a delay, but I don't know whether that's.
Oh, guys, I have to get somebody at the door, so please continue. Right. But 1 second, yes.
No worries.
Hold it up. I'll be back in 1 second. Actually, I'll just go and meet Joachim off screen.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, Robin.
That will be that will be something if now they appear in one screen together.
Pop surprise. We're actually gonna do a Stoor session right now. Yeah.
But okay, let's see.
Yeah, I actually just brought the Octatrack MK2 with me because I was kind of trying to reconfigure the live design. Yeah, because I feel like so much of like not just my own live setups, but in general, it's just always too many things, and just trying to look for a more compact setup and trying to find machines that can kind of allow you to do more with less. It could get so overwhelming, and so I've just been kind of studying it in and out, but it's quite complex. Like there's a lot of capabilities, which is a blessing and a curse. But it's just nice to have a piece that allows you to kind of be flexible with how deeply complex you want it to be or how simple you want it to be as well. But it's definitely an overwhelming one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny with gear, and especially I found with performing live. I've always found that like it's great I like to see a bit of kit that's very deep at home or in the studio. But when I'm doing a live show, I want some elements of it to be very simple and reliable because I don't like.
You want to like really make access to what you want.
Exactly.
What to do with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I have as well. And what I always try to do is I want to, when I do a live set, I want to, like, my setup, I always want it to be a good balance between room for creativity, but also overview. Like if you have many things that you can do at any time, then you lose a bit of overview. And that can be, too challenging maybe. So I always try to find a balance in that. Like, of course, a lot of room for creativity, but also like in a way that I still have overview in what I'm doing and where I'm going.
Yep, totally. This machine is quite nice for that. I guess Luke, touching on your point of like allowing things to be compact, but within that, it's nice to know that there are further, that there's a further capacity. So if you did want to stretch it really far, you could all within one machine. Versus, having to bring all these things along with you that you don't use maybe or just overload.
Yeah.
Jochem, we were talking about live setups.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
You mean like limitation versus possibilities and stuff?
Yeah, but also I see. Hey there.
Hi, Luke.
Hey there.
How you doing? Actually, Lucy's not here tonight, but I would like just to give him a quick Tibetan bong.
Okay.
I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah, they can definitely hear it.
Loud and clear.
Everyone has tinnitus now. Or no, the
Okay. It's just just a
shout out to the new new citizen, the new member of the human race.
Yeah. on the same day as Boris here had a baby. The the bumbling Boris. So yeah, congratulations, Lucy. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sorry. Anyway, yeah.
Yes. So Jochem, what I said, we were talking about live setups. What regarding what sort of gear is we would choose to use and stuff like that.
Oh, well, yeah. To me personally, I mean, I've worked with many. Like lots of hardware to. Oh, you still? Are we still here?
I got a spinning. Oh, no, you're back.
Yeah, I got a spinning. I got a spinning wheel. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, anything from a laptop with a controller to massive hardware setups as a live setup. But the thing that is important for me is that I really know and understand and master the setup before I take it on the road.
Yeah.
Because it's basically your instrument. It's like it's an instrument.
Yeah, exactly.
That you really have to.
Yeah.
No matter how many components it's made out of, I mean, it can be made out of a few components or a lot of components, but you should really be fluid with the technology. You shouldn't even be thinking about it. You should just be able to perform and, and I mean, as long as that's the case, I don't think it really makes a difference whether it's hardware or software or what kind of what brands or what.
No. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not a purist.
I've never really thought the technology itself is the most important part of playing in front of people. Mm-hmm. It's how little you really have to think about using it.
Yeah,
because that's not entertaining. Hey everyone, I managed to get into menu B and find the filter. You don't want to be doing that. It's
exactly.
It shouldn't be or this is the newest thing and stuff like that. If you can use it well and quickly and you're comfortable with it, then that's more important.
Then that's fine. Yeah, but it shouldn't be what it's about.
Yeah.
Well, there are also a lot of other things that that I keep in mind when I'm deciding about what to use for performance, and that's you have to be able to make bold gestures. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference whether you can influence for example an auto panner on a clap or something like you know what I mean, because nobody's ever going to hear that and nobody's ever going to notice, or you cannot really shape your music.
Well, actually, about 3 people will notice. 3, and they'll come to you and say, "Oh, I like your panning, man."
Yeah.
And
the rest of the crowd will be, well,
yeah. But I mean, if you have to have control over your arrangement or over the development of a track, how it kind of changes over time. You should be able to have a big influence on that, and I think like bold things. I mean, it's not only like muting things individually or whatever, but it's really sort of being able to adjust on the fly to wherever you want it to go. You shouldn't be limited to, well, I've got another 64 bars, if some, to have to run through it before I can change anything. You have to be, it has to be instant. You know what I mean?
Everything. Yeah.
Or like small details really don't really matter in a club. No. It's more like the big gestures, the big changes, and you have to be able to access those anytime you need them. You need them there, and so you can really influence the energy in a room, or adjust to the mood or whatever. And also the order in which things are played is something that I always try to keep open. Instead of playing a set list from start to finish, where every track has its place in the set. You see a lot of live shows like that, but that's more like a concert. It's fine, it works for certain types of music. But if it's really about creating an energy in a room or making people dance, it's more about adjusting, more like DJing, playing the right thing at the right moment, and that's something I always try to build into whatever system I use.
Yeah, because you only know what the right moment is when you're actually playing and you have the atmosphere in the room. No,
yeah,
you can do a
moment.
predetermined set, but you never know how things are going to turn out.
Yeah, I mean,
and you shouldn't do. You shouldn't
exactly.
do. Yeah, it's I never really second guess a gig. For me, it's I never really know. So I think that's really healthy to go in there with a sort of expectation of knowing you got to be flexible. That it's not about what you think it's going to be. It's about feeling what's going on when you're there.
Exactly.
Because that's the special thing, isn't it? That's the
exactly
that is what makes a night a night. It's just happening then, and there's no you just don't know.
Yeah. Do you guys feel that sometimes like the challenge of using a new piece is also an exciting one in the sense that it kind of forces you to re-envision your creative process? So for example, if you're really aware of a particular piece of gear, you might have so much control over it that you're not allowing it to have the sort of like improv moments, right? So I think like my question, I guess, is like, is that more of a challenge or is that something that is like motivating, in the process for you guys?
Are you talking about live sets?
Sure, live or hybrid, I guess, just using a new piece of gear, and just kind of the challenge of sort of the learning curve of having to learn it, but as well, like, leaving these moments where things can kind of go a bit like off tangent, but that can be a beautiful thing, I guess.
I love it. I mean, I've got like a standard setup, which I use for most gigs. But I also play with, I use an Octatrack and Tractor, and for my DJ sets then, right? But the Octatrack is full of loops and they change all the time, and the Tractor is full of tracks which I don't really use as tracks, but more as loops. That's the standard thing I do, but I've recently also started playing on CDJs, which I never had, believe it or not. And it's hard work because I don't really understand these machines, and I don't particularly like them either. I think they're pieces of shit. But yeah, being forced to still make a good set out of it, keeps me on my toes and has resulted in some interesting moments, And then the other thing I do is I've only done it once, but I'm trying to start doing more once the clubs open up again. Is a 4-deck vinyl set with records that I cut myself, and the records are basically just tools. They are not like complete tracks, but they are like either percussion, hi-hat, or melodic things, or bass, drums and bass loops, or anything in between, and I kind of stitch them together. And I actually need 4 decks at the same time, otherwise it'll just be a part of a track, So, and they're all cut at the same speed, so I basically just have to take care of the phase of the records, not really the pitch. And even though they're the same speed, they still kind of there's always a little bit of friction going on, with the sync and everything. And because turntables in a club, especially if you have 4, is a very fragile system, a very, very a system which is very unstable and influenced by the circumstances and the sound in the room, the feedback of the bass and everything. And movement of the stage and stuff like that. it's highly risky, but a lot of fun. So yeah, I mean,
it's bloody risky, man.
It is very risky.
That's
but
actually, that actually when yeah, that reminds me actually. One of the original ideas I had when me, Steve, and Dave came up with the LSD concept was based on that idea of a turntable orchestra using different parts, not on 1210s. That only takes a brave man like you, but on CDJs to actually have different parts on each CDJ. Because I just remember that idea from I think it was 1987 or 8, and there was someone trying to do that back then with vinyl, and it always I always thought that was a pretty good idea, but I think yeah, I mean, if you can pull it off on vinyl, that's testing, man.
It's a hell of a lot of work, because you have to create the music or the parts, and then you have to cut them and make sure they blend well, and so you basically have to make an entire discography to be able to do just that set, but it's fun, because for this first one I spent 2 weeks in the studio and I made about 50 tracks, 50 parts, and cut them on both sides of the record. Some had 2 tracks, some had 1. It's a fun way of doing it. I mean, before I moved to any hardware or digital stuff, I used to play with vinyl, so it's I mean, the feeling with decks is still there, but it's a totally different approach. I think to be honest, Luke, you said somebody around 2000, 2001, but I think it was practice in the drum and bass era, where people used to play a lot of acetates. They would cut them on one speed. They would all cut them on 170 or something, so they could use multiple decks. It's not a new idea, it's just the fact that I have access to a vinyl cutter, that I experimenting.
It's a challenge. It's a challenge, man.
It's fun, but I mean, So anyway, but there is, for to come back to the question, there's not a real ideal setup for me, but what it does need for me is something to like Sophia said, something new that is challenging, so you're on the tip of your toes, or you're really sort of keeping it together, barely keeping it together. I think that usually is the most interesting position to be in. So I mean, there needs to be some kind of challenge, I think.
Well, it's interesting when Sophia was saying introducing new bits of kit. I've tended to do that. So, like you were saying, Joachim, the live show setup is pretty much stays the same. But if I get something new, a little box I want to try out, it kind of goes on the side. And I think, I'm going to do this show tonight, but I'm going to try working with this guy here. Bring in this guy and see how it goes. And it gets kind of one chance. It gets one chance to impress me, and that it doesn't disturb my kind of my psyche of the gig. So I think, okay, I've put something in there that could work. Let's see how it is when I get this guy going here, and if it works, then I think, okay, maybe maybe it can fit in. So when it comes to performing, and Sophia saying about new gear, unless there's something about it that's kind of exciting and almost fun to use it live, I'm pretty. It's not something I'd introduce easily, you know, because it would start to change too much, and that doesn't always work out the way I want it to work out. So simple can, I think I like simple. I like boxes that do one thing.
Yeah.
You know. I've got a few pedals. One called a Big Muff.
Oh, Electro-Harmonix.
Sorry. Yeah, you know, and you know, I didn't think of the name, but but you know, you slam it in there, and you know, it does one thing, and it does it well, and I use it on one track, and it's just there for that track, and that's
right.
That's good for me.
Okay. Yeah.
Is that your dog?
My dog?
Yeah.
No, it's Sander.
Oh, it's Sander.
Okay.
Yeah.
Barking in the back. Yeah.
I forgot to put him on his leash.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some you know, we can, people who are watching this can ask questions in the YouTube chat, and I've seen some things appear here. Let me see if there's anything that we that I think kind of connect to what we are saying, or okay, maybe this one is interesting.
What you got?
This one. Which pieces of hardware were seminal for starting off your music making, and do you still have them in your setup? From Fakuru? Sorry to butcher your name, dude. Okay.
Well, in my case, a long time ago, somewhere in the mid-90s, I started with an old MPC, because I always wanted to. My first aim with making music was always to play it live, because I was always impressed by live acts back in the day. So that's what I wanted to do as well. So that's why my first instrument was an MPC. And right now, I still have it here, but I don't use it in my setup anymore. But I still have it.
For me,
what about you? Yeah,
SL 1210. That was the first electronic instrument that I learned how to manipulate music, I think.
Yeah.
What about you, Sophia?
Yeah, you know, I guess for me, like coming from more of a classical background, the rhetoric was always like, learn your one instrument really well before you hop onto anything else. Because I feel like there's so many, like at least what I've seen, so many producers that start off not understanding like the fundamentals of production, but they just dive straight into gear. And it's like, for me, I've made a point to stay completely in the box when I was starting off and really understand production and composition to like the best of my ability to understand the moving pieces, and ultimately started to sort of add little pieces as I went along, like whenever I felt like I was ready and when I had a grasp of whatever instrument I already had. And I feel like for me, that process has always worked, just having like an efficient setup that I'm actually using and that I really understand in depth. And yeah, just slowly, I feel like there's a stigma in electronic music naturally because of the instruments that it's made with, that you have to start off with gear. And I feel like it doesn't necessarily have to work that way. The process can be whatever. And for me, I found it to be the opposite, where I had to kind of start with my DAW, start with Logic, and then kind of expand from there. And now
I think that's a great attitude to have.
Yeah,
I really do, because you don't need that much to really make something, because it's
no, man. A set of speakers and one single instrument is enough to get something interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's what's changed a lot over the years is the tinsel and the idea that surrounds a bit of kit didn't used to be there before. So things weren't glammed up as much as being, you know, putting pictures behind a bit of equipment with someone on stage going like that. You know, this is going to make you that. And that it didn't used to be like that. And it's, I mean, I guess everyone learns in the end, but when it comes to it, it's really, no bit of kit is going to make you something. You know, that only comes from in you
yourself. Yeah.
Totally.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's it. That's it. You are the instrument, really.
Completely.
Yeah. I mean I mean we all like to try different pieces of kit and you know learn, you know, get inspiration from it in some sense, I guess.
You stopped, Joachim.
It doesn't fatigue.
What
about now?
You're back in the room.
Okay. I mean, there's, you know, when I tour and even, you know, when I talk to people about, you know, who want to know about how I work in the studio, there's always this question: what should I get? You know, what piece of gear should I get? And I always feel that I can't really give any proper advice because, you know, it shouldn't really matter. You know, I mean, any piece of hardware or any plugin or whatever you use should get you going. You know, and everybody approaches a certain piece of gear or software in a completely different way, and therefore it is a different instrument to everybody who uses it, you know. So I don't know. I mean, if people say, what should I get? Should I get this compressor or that, you know, big, you know, investment in you know, expensive shit? I said, no, man, just go to eBay or some, you know, online market, get like a whole shopping bag full of crappy guitar pedals and you know, two or three crappy old drum machines or synths, and just patch them up in different ways and see what happens. You know, I mean, that's certainly a way to get a sound going. You know, and I mean that's the cheapest way to get you going, I guess, including of course just getting a laptop or a computer and get some software. But to be honest, starting in software, I think, can be very daunting. You know, if that's the platform you're starting with, I'm afraid, or I don't know if you really, because of the massive amount of choices and the limitless amount of possibilities that exist inside a DAW or you know, music software, it's very easy to just, you know, approach it in a very shallow way and move on to something else before you even got a result, you know, or even dug into it in such a way that you really understand the piece of you know, machine, you know, the machinery that you're exploring. I mean, the best thing really is to start with one thing or two or three maybe, but not like a limitless amount of plugins or pieces of hardware, because you get lost and you just will be disappointed and demotivated, you know. It's much better to really explore one piece of gear.
I mean, that kind of reminds me when I did the Archangel album, the Planetary album, I actually set the whole purpose I set out was I had to write the whole thing in live without any external instruments. Maybe there's a couple of little bits I added to it afterwards, but the whole of the album is done only using Ableton's synths. The whole thing. And this was something I wanted to prove to myself, that I could write something just using that one thing. This last week we touched on limitation, you know, which I think is an important thing, and we were talking about that, and that got us onto Eno. Actually, I remember. But you know, in the case of that album, that was very much a a set out challenge to almost not to prove a point just for an academic reason, but to see what I could do with that, just as it is. And I was very pleased with the result. And the funny thing is, I remember the after effects of that when I'd been on the road. And I remember this one trip where I was in the back of the car going to the gig, and the really enthusiastic guy in the front, and he turned around to me, goes, "Wow, that album, man, that's just what, it's so analog. What synths did you use on that album?" And you know what? I didn't have the heart to tell him that I just did it in live. I couldn't, because he was so vibed up, and it just, just saying I did it in live was, I don't know, I just couldn't tell him. So I just said, yeah, loads of stuff. But I think that I've always found that interesting, that idea that it's not more of everything, but what you can do with less. Creatively, I've always found that inspiring.
Yeah, restriction is good for creative. Yeah.
And if you can't pull it off, well, you're no good.
Yeah, exactly. Then you suck.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing to mention that that you are able to do things like this only in live, because I think it shows people that they don't necessarily have to buy the newest fanciest VST to really make something great.
Gear lust.
It's a great thing.
Yeah, it's easy to become a victim.
Yeah,
I feel like there's always this sort of like backlash from people who are like very much like gearheads, like even at the concept of sort of just using stock plugins, and like I never really understood that. I can sort of understand creatively it can get daunting, Joachim, but as well, like you said, I feel it's like how far you push it. Like, to be honest, like the chunk of what I've been doing lately has been stock plugins, not just to necessarily prove a point to myself, but sometimes it's just efficient. My thoughts are coming quickly, and it's just a very effective way of working. So I feel like it really depends. And it's like great. We all love extra toys, of course. It's never a bad thing, but I mean, it's also nice
if it's
to have
already there.
Not having, totally, yeah. And it's a fast way. Sometimes, you just have ideas and you just want to get it out really quickly, right? It just depends what, or if you've got a lot of time to jam, then, equally a lot of gear could also be exciting.
That bridges nicely to the question that is here now from Jesse or Jesse. I tend to lose myself in compression and endless. Yeah. I would say move on to the next one. I mean, a piece of music is a piece of music, and it's got to be there, even if it sounds shit, and it should still be as exciting as a piece of music, And plugins are not gonna make a shitty record sound amazing. I mean, it could help. True. It could, or it doesn't make. It could make it sound amazing, but it doesn't change anything about the content and about the heart and soul and the guts of the track. No. It's the guts needs to be there. The power, the energy, the idea. The intent, the idea. Because. Basically, all you're doing as a musician is convey ideas. You're basically creating, like a parallel or an alternative reality to daily life. And a feeling, an emotion, whatever. And if those elemental things aren't there in your track, it's tempting to go in there and check all the menus and keep stacking plugins and try to rescue it from being dull or whatever. But I would say don't spend any time on it. Just make 10 new ones, in the time that you would otherwise spend on EQing and compression, just start 10 new ideas, just even, spend half an hour on making a new loop or a new sound or whatever, rather than just trying to salvage something which wasn't, worth it in the first place.
You can't flog a dead horse.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. I could have. Yeah. I mean, that sums it up. Yeah.
Well, you can, but you know, but then that's just getting weird, isn't it? You know. Yeah. I mean, if it, I think it's if it's not happening, it's not happening when it comes to music, and you know, there's a kind of time where you go, okay, you know, I'm going to go and do something else for a bit. This isn't happening today. Yeah, that's part of the natural thing.
There's one specifically addressed to you, Luke, right here.
Oh yeah. Spellet, yeah. Husband. Yeah, well, husband. I like sub. I like bass. I mean, on that particular track, if you want to get technical about it, there's a hell of a lot of compression, because I put there's actually a lot of different. There's a lot of stuff going down the bottom end, and I remember I used a lot of compression limiting to create a sound out of everything that was down there. And you know, it's always hit or miss with that kind of thing, because when you go to play it out, you never really, especially with subby stuff, you never really know how that's going to sound when you play it out. So there was a few different versions, until I felt it was about right. So yeah. But sometimes, you know, sometimes compression works, sometimes limiting works, and sometimes it just doesn't. And I've never found a track that you can treat in the same way just to get a good result. It's really random.
Yeah.
Well, it's not random. It's because of the other elements surrounding that sub, you know. I mean, if you're, I mean, it's a question that I mean, there's a lot of people who are, you know, aspiring producers, or people who are, you know, getting stuck with handling bass in a mix. They always, you know, ask questions about how you get a kick sound so loud, and you know, the easy answer really is, you know, just turn down the rest. You know what I mean? Then your kick is louder. Kick. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, in order to have something stand out really obviously, the other stuff needs to be more in the background, if you know what I mean. You know, I mean, there's such a thing as like the overall perceived loudness of a track, but even in a loud sounding track, you can have a loud kick drum, but you will notice once you start to analyze this that there is nothing really in the way of the kick. You know, there could be like some huge bass line going on, and you're wondering, why doesn't my kick you know, punch through? That's because your bass line is too big. You know, you have to kind of separate these things in order to give every element its own space in a mix, you know. And that's I mean, you can just keep on adding dBs to something to make it seem louder, but it might actually completely put the sound out of the right context. You know, it's like you said, Luke, there is no fixed rule. Every track that you
different,
do,
so it needs to be treated different.
And you have to keep on sort of shaving off other elements until the thing that you really want to stand out doesn't really necessarily only is true for a kick, but it's true for everything. If you want something to be loud, you have to shave off some bits and things of other stuff to make it stand out more, you know. And adding the missing thing in a certain sound doesn't always mean it's going to have the desired result. You know, it could also be in, you know, other stuff that is masking your you know, your sound that you want to make more apparent in a mix.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so much sort of like a lot of overly stacking distortion, particularly now, versus just sculpting the sounds that you already have and just kind of working away and shaving away. And like you said, space, I think, you know, is actually how you can get so much more volume out of what you already have versus just continuously putting things on
think
top.
so too.
And then it just
less is more in a way.
Right?
Yeah.
So much it can be.
I can live with just a kick drum. if it's the lovely sounding one. Okay, throw in the hi-hat then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That's one.
Yeah, I mean, but it's kind of, there's truth in that, because you know, I mean, in the studio we all spend ages and ages making, you know, something sound right, you know, and, you know, tweaking little things. But if you take you know, a drum machine, you know, mostly, you know, like a 909 or an 808, or it's pretty much true for even, you know, modern drum machines like you know, analog rhythm or whatever.
Yeah.
If you connect just a stereo out to a PA
Yeah.
in a big room with a massive sound system, it's gonna sound absolutely amazing. You know, it's gonna sound
Yeah.
really, really big.
Totally.
And
True.
every time that happens, you know, I'm like, what am I doing in the studio? You know, you can just do drum tracks and the same, you know, simple
Yeah.
kick hat snare or kick hat clap or whatever, and it'll be massive, you know, in a club. I mean, of course, we like textures and we like to kind of, you know, shape things to a certain aesthetic. That's why we spend time producing stuff, you know, you know, invest time in shaping the sounds. But yeah, the raw sounds are very, very, very powerful by themselves, you know.
They are in a venue. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in a warehouse venue. You know, it just gives it that whole. A 909 in a warehouse is huge.
Yeah.
Correct.
With the reverb from the, you know, from the venue.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there was one. Okay, guys, there was one other here.
What's this one in Dutch for you, Joachim? Hey, Joachim, get this Hangout, or is that a personal one? I don't.
Oh, I don't know. I don't see this. I was the. No,
I
this
don't
was
see it here.
Sanny Verkusen.
Okay, I'll get back to that.
Okay.
This I thought I thought this one was interesting from Tom Humphries.
Yeah.
About generative algorithmic music, and you know, have we experimented with them? I'm sure Robin has.
A bit, yeah, and I find it interesting, but of course I like generative and algorithmic, but to be within a certain frame that it doesn't go in or doesn't evolve into ways that I wouldn't like it. So I definitely like generative, but it needs to be. I want to have some kind of control over it, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, the surround sound set that I did on the Fusion Festival is I think that's a good example of how things evolved, but still in a way that I could control it, because how do I explain this properly? Yeah, I had a certain idea in mind, like what the sound needed to be atmosphere-wise. So they were like evolving, but only to a certain extent, because I was doing so many things at the same time there. Also the surround part, that the sounds being generative were helping me to be able to focus on, like, for example, some of the surround things. So yeah, and it's a short answer. Yeah, I really like it, generative stuff. But again, I want to have some control over it as well. And regarding the coding, no, I didn't do any live coding, because I think coding is something that should be done beforehand, because it's not a creative process. So yeah, the coding is I would not do that live personally.
Yeah,
I
mean
the coding is very abstract, because coding is just like typed on the keyboard.
Coders think coding is creative, though.
That's fine. That's perfectly fine. Yeah.
No, but I mean, I think there's this is one of these things that pops up when you start getting into things like Reactor or MaxMSP or stuff like that. I mean, you can have a brain that
I use MaxMSP for my surround thing, so yeah.
Yeah, well, I've used those things as well, but I don't have the coder's brain. You know what I mean? Once you put me behind a patch, or I can modify things. I can change things in MaxMSP, but I would never sit down and build an entire patch from scratch. You know what I mean? That's just I'm just too impatient for that. I mean, I do like both. I do really like to work with these systems and get things out of it. And both these things I mentioned, MaxMSP and Reactor have really good communities around them to help you out if you get stuck with something. But I didn't get any further than just sort of really crudely adjust existing patches and things that floating around in these communities. Sorry.
Are we talking about the ever evolving?
Well,
press a button and it just gets on with it itself.
Yeah, I mean, you can get, of course, you can get that with analog gear as well. But I mean, with modular systems such as the Colossus you have behind you, you can set up a patch which basically plays forever and keeps evolving and changing, and and that's generative. Basically, that's the generative. I think what Tom is talking about. But I think it's very useful and a lot of fun to set up patches like that, or to create things like that in software or whatever. I mean, for me it would only be to generate things that I can later go back to and use in a certain way. And I mean, I've done generative patches for installations in galleries and stuff, and it's fun and interesting. But I always want to impose an idea on something, and give it, have, like Robin said, have some kind of control over what it's doing. And
because in the end, it needs to fulfill the purpose that I have, that I wanted to do in the first place.
Yeah.
I actually quite dislike it, actually, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I've never felt, I've never liked that idea of, you move a few balls around on an iPad and, and it's playing this forever looping bells that change all the time. Whether it's a control thing, which it probably is, to be honest, I just want control over what I can hear. So I think maybe that's more of a control freak thing, but I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy things that go off on their own.
Yeah.
And do their own thing. I actually maybe I don't know why that is, but I just it's okay, but it's kind of like pressing demo,
No, it's not like that at all. I don't think
No,
so.
it feels like that. It feels like that.
Right, okay.
It's like I'm not doing anything. It's kind of like
the thing that you are doing is creating the circumstances for this patch to exist,
You're creating this frame, yeah.
Yeah, so you are creating the parameters and the circumstances and the how things are interacting with each other. So the end result is I think as valid yours, your creation as a track that you write out in a DAW or something, or record with hardware. It's as much a choice, It's like I think it's a
choice, yeah, but I'm not. But I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that you're
in the end, you know, what we are doing is
your feeling and intent goes into that. You know,
no, but like we discussed earlier in the
because
chat,
what you're doing is it's an option. Yeah, I mean it's a valid option. I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying the result doesn't necessarily carry you. It's carrying a mathematical algorithm.
I'm not sure if I agree, Luke.
You don't have to agree, man. I'm not. I'm just you know, seeing two different things.
Right, because I think what I think is that eventually what it comes down to is your judgment, and that's that is what counts. You know, I mean, even if you're writing music with, like we discussed earlier in the chat, you know, you're writing music and you start out with this certain idea or aesthetic, and you find yourself doing something which is kind of representing what you were starting out with, but turns in a totally different direction. But all the while, you are judging what you are doing and making these decisions. And that is as true for writing a track in the traditional way, but also for you know, working with a generative patch. You know, you are tweaking things. You know, you are kind of writing the circumstances, or you know, manipulating a patch, or even, you know, writing code for that. And all this time, your judgment is the leading factor in what it's going to be. So it's as much your track as a track which is created in a traditional way. That's what I think.
If you've written the code, you mean?
No, if you are, you know, if you are creating a generative patch, you know, or a generative use generative software to create something. It's the judgment that counts. It's not the you know what I mean?
But the thing is, you still need control.
Because you have control. You have control. Well, while you are putting it together, while you are, you know, making these decisions. Okay, I'm gonna have this element influence that element, and, you know, that's all, you know, sort of. In that moment, you are in control of it.
That's once you are
once you are done with it and think, okay, now it's generating something that I like. It's your judgment and your judgment alone that decides when it's finished, and that is exactly the same as with writing music in any other way.
I disagree a bit there, but.
Okay, go.
Okay.
You know, it's good to have, you know, it's good to, you know.
Context
absolutely.
Well, I mean, a lot of dance music, there's a sort of functionality or an expectation around something. So once you lose control of that, you no longer can sort of manipulate the audience towards a specific sort of destination, right? So maybe within like a more like gallery setting, let's say, or just depending on the sort of show and the experience, that can kind of fluctuate. Whereas like if you've got an hour set, you know, and you just have to sort of get people moving, and depending on the time of the night, maybe that can kind of differ how far you push the sort of, you know, independence away from control.
Yeah. Maybe it's just a control thing. I don't know.
Could be.
It's an interesting question though. Yeah. Tom came up with a good question there, I think.
Here's one by Stephen. What do you do when you have no inspiration or don't feel like making music? Do you force yourself to work in the studio?
No, just go and do something totally different. Totally. No. If it, you know.
Yeah, definitely not.
It's got to snap it when it's there, I think.
Yeah.
I can't stand being in a studio personally if I'm not there to do something. You know, it's not for me.
Well, Robin was saying that earlier, right? Sort of the idea of now being in quarantine and having this, like, you know, dire expectation that you have to be making something, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You know, you don't have to force the process. You were saying earlier.
You cannot force the creativity, you know. If it's not there at the moment, it's not there, you know. And that's fine.
Yeah, true. But I mean, it's true that's true. Yeah. But I mean, if you can also dedicate some time to learn a certain piece of equipment.
Yeah, that's more
like
true.
it's more like an admin day, you know, like okay, I've got this thing. It's like, housekeeping. It's making backups.
That is true as well.
Yeah.
Do you have a?
But that's a purpose, system? Isn't it? That's a purpose.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah. I mean, actually, it was one of the most important things I learned about studios and computers is back in the day. Daniel Miller from Mute, he said to me, "Whatever you do, always back up what you do."
Right.
And from that. And from that day, I've just become I've got backups of backups.
Yeah.
I've got everything is doubled, tripled. I can't have it.
Where does your data live at the moment?
It lives through that door.
Tell us.
There's a load of network disks,
right?
NAS, and everything's raided and backed up on there. Every track that hasn't been released or anything like that's on a shelf.
Ooh.
And
right. So, but so what happens when your studio burns down?
I got it in the cloud.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Good.
What happens if Apple's data centers burn down?
Yeah.
Well, I had a horror story last year, Joachim, after I played for you for the AD event. My bag went missing with my both hard drives and all my USBs. And so I learned my lesson the hard way, definitely. And now, like Luke said, just have triple backups because you can never rely on one thing, right?
Yeah,
it's actually quite scary because it also has, so much of your personal information. And we just kind of, we just blindly just upload all our content to one thing and expecting it won't go, and then it just disappears. So learn the hard way, definitely.
Yeah.
So have you never ever lost anything then, Luke?
Yeah, I've lost quite a lot.
Okay. Right. Okay. Right.
Mainly from maybe a power outage or a disk I haven't backed up and the disk goes down, something like that. Yep. Yeah. Quite a lot.
Yeah.
Got a few scars. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here.
Yeah, me too. Unfortunately, I mean, I've since the the lockdown happened, I've also done a few weeks of few hours a day just going through CDRs and stuff. And just put them back on hard drives because they were originally backups of hard drives which no longer exist. So they only exist on some of the stuff only exists on these CDRs. And it's funny to see how quick all these different formats that we've used over the years go obsolete. I've got boxes of empty DAT tapes. MO drives, zip disks,
zips,
zip 128 and I believe 512 or something, or I
think there was a 1 gig, wasn't there? A 1 gig.
Yeah, at some point.
Zip.
Yeah. I mean, I stopped using zips when my drives got infected with the click of death.
Oh yeah.
Same here.
So
the click of death.
Click. Oh my God, I lost another one. And they would copy from one disk to the other, and even to drives. I don't know how it exactly worked, but it was transferable between drives with infected disks. Something about the head aligning to, trying to force, itself to reading it and then therefore being screwed up or whatever. I don't know. I'm not too technical in that area, but anyway, I mean, cassette tapes, reel-to-reel tapes. I've got loads and loads of stuff, and I'm all digitizing this, which is up to the cloud at the same time. So but found a load of stuff that I've completely forgot about, and I also didn't find some stuff that I was after, that I really wanted to find. I haven't found yet, so might be lost in one or two crashes that I had in the past. I don't know. So
and that and you end up spending a day searching for that one. Because you're convinced you're convinced it's on.
That it's there. That it's there.
Yeah.
It's there. You can remember it.
Yeah.
And like, I know it was on that drive. It was on that. I backed it up to that drive. What happened to that drive, man? It's like, yeah.
But it's funny. It's funny to see how quickly these things happen, because the fact that I have 4 or 5 boxes of 90-minute Ampex DAT tapes, which are still sealed. At some point when I was living at that time, I was thinking I should buy 4 more boxes, and then all of a sudden, they're sitting there and never touch them again. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And how soon you forget about these things. Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah.
So vinyl, people. Vinyl. That's the best storage medium. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, reel-to-reel tapes there, isn't it, as well?
Well, but
if you want to go ready.
No. But they are after about 40 years, even if you keep them in the best conditions possible, they will wear out and they will dissolve and become unreadable.
They do.
Vinyl,
you got to back them up. Yeah.
Yeah. Vinyl is something. If you bury a box of records in the ground, and dig them up in 200 years, prove if the technology would still be there, they're playable, because they don't deteriorate as much as everything else. So
well, I remember I found in someone's house quite a few years ago, a copy of the state funeral of Winston Churchill on vinyl in a gatefold, which I thought was quite curious. And I took it home and it played perfectly. And I don't know when he died, but I mean, it must have been in the 60s, right, or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting, sort of subject to have on vinyl.
Mm-hmm.
You don't expect to come across Winston Churchill's funeral on vinyl. But, I just always remember it was mouldy. The cover was mouldy. It had been down in this damp basement, but took it home. Perfect. So there I sat, smoking a pipe, listening to Mr. Churchill's send-off. Yeah.
Right. Let's see if there's any other interesting questions. I don't know. Some people talking about sequencers. Anybody has a favorite hardware sequencer? Or any sequencer in general? Does it make a difference what sequencer you use?
I've just been using the MK2. I think it just doesn't really matter. It depends if you're playing out live or for production. But I think, again, going back to the same point of how you use things, right? How your brain wraps around what it is that you're using.
I think so too.
Yeah, there's many ways to sequence stuff, and they, different methods, all have different results or different ways of approaching what you're doing. But I don't think, I like arpeggiators, to be honest. Arpeggiators are fun.
Arpeggiators are good. They're always good.
Yeah.
They're always good, man.
Instant gratification.
Yeah. Sounds nice,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so many options, isn't there, for sequencers, hardware, software. I don't think it makes any difference, really.
To sidechain or not to sidechain? No sidechain.
That is the question. Which personally I'm not going to answer. But
no, okay.
Maybe someone else wants to.
It's a tool. It's a tool.
It depends a bit what you want to achieve, maybe. But yeah.
Yeah, for me, quite a lot, because going back to the point we were saying about sculpting the sounds that you have and getting the most out of it instead of just stacking things on top, and I prefer to kind of effectively sculpt away and sound design what I have. So definitely a lot of side chaining and just kind of allowing dynamic and things to move in and out where they should. Space, definitely a lot of space. So there's too much overload now, just everything just getting piled on top, and it's difficult for things to kind of stand out in the mix now because just things are just getting piled. So
yeah, I think to look at it, everything is just a tool.
Yeah.
And it can be used for whatever you want to use it for, whether you're meant to use it for something or not for that purpose. I don't think it really matters, but I just see everything as a tool, it does something, and it's up to you how you use it. And, you know, if you want to find out how a sound was made and then copy it, then you will find out how it was made. And something like side chaining has a notoriety for a certain sucking sound, you know.
If you use side chaining as an effect, yes, it does. But you can also use it. You can also use it completely undetectable, transparent in the background to make space for something else. Yeah,
which was actually its original intent, I believe.
Yeah.
But you know, it's find a different use for it. That's quite fun, actually. Yeah.
Have you ever rigged a sound system on stage? Yes, I have, multiple times, and I'm not sorry.
I set one on fire in Australia. Seriously, yeah. I was playing in the sub caught fire, the speaker.
Okay. No, as far as I know, I haven't.
It's still time, man.
I did wreck the ears of a sound engineer.
Ooh.
When I think because I was doing a sound check, and that was with the guy that I was doing industrial hardcore live sets back in the day. By the way, that's the same guy who asked this question. So hello, Chris. We were playing in a little place called Lisse. And back then I had my big setup with me with the 909 and all. And I had my mixer full open. And somehow the sound engineer, I thought, convinced me that the PA was still off. And the sound engineer was doing something in the sub of the club. He was adjusting something. And I had my MPC, and my MPC was triggering the 909. And then through a range of effects, so you have this 909, but then the hardcore version. So I gently tapped the pad of the MPC, and then you got this hardcore kick, 909 hardcore kick, like BAM, like full on the sound system. And then I heard someone yelling. And it turned out to be the sound engineer that was with his head in the sub doing something, whatever. So, that's the only thing as close that I came as wrecking something. But,
Yeah, I remember in the
yeah, he's okay. He was definitely okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Well, sub doesn't really damage your ears as much as high end. I mean, it can be. Yeah. I mean, I can imagine it was a massive shock to be in a sub or close to a sub and you doing that. But it would be worse if it's a microphone feedback or something at that level. That is just killing.
Totally.
That's absolutely
true.
I've started using, like per my audiologist's recommendation, I started using my custom earplugs when I'm in the studio making music as well, just changing the filter on it, because there have been so many incidents of just unplugging cables, and I just, you're just in the middle of it and you forget, and then it takes one pop to just completely wreck your ear. So I've definitely wrecked my own ears in the studio. So I started wearing earplugs, at least just when I'm sketching ideas, obviously not in the mixing process, but certainly for sketching, because you just never know. You're in the middle of a session, you get excited, you unplug a cable and just, it's gone. So it's been quite helpful, even especially when I'm in my headphones, so it's just eliminates a lot of risk.
Yeah, okay.
I've blew up multiple sound system. I once blew out an entire side of the PA, like the left side. And there was one instance that I can remember, which was really funny. That's another occasion. I was playing, and there was these, it was like in the early 90s, and they used to give you fucking guitar wedges as monitors, at that time.
Yeah.
These
Floor
terrible sounding,
wedges. Yeah.
terrible sounding, especially for the high end is just terrible. Anyway, for electronic music anyway. Because that's what they're not designed. They're not designed to do that. They're not designed to replicate, full range sound. So, and I was, I had this thing next to me, and I never really watched it. And then all of a sudden, I thought, this thing sounds pretty terrible. What's going on? So I looked over, and I saw in the box, I saw this really nice sort of orange glowing circle, and I thought, wow, they have these special effect wedges, with
okay,
with like a LED strip in inside or something, which makes it glow orange. And then I looked, at my stuff in the room again, and all of a sudden I start to smell this funny smell, and looked again, and it turned red. And just at the moment I was looking, there was this big flame coming out of it, poof, and the whole paper just. Okay. Just disappeared at once, and I saw, and it turned it down, of course, you pull the plug. That was interesting. People started throwing beer into it and everything to get rid of the flames.
Beer.
Anyway, yeah, good idea, right.
That's vodka rock and roll, man.
Better. Yeah.
Rock and roll, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I blew up.
That's a standard fire extinguisher for a rock and roll wedge.
Yeah. Yeah, and I blew up studio speakers too, which is quite terrible. The last one I did that was about 2 years ago. I blew a tweeter out on one of my PMCs, looking, when I was trying to find like extreme frequencies in the electrode machine drum. Oh, sorry, analog rhythm. And the frequencies that thing can produce is just absolutely insane. And I don't know what happened, but it just fried my tweeter, which was terrible, because it needed to be ordered from the UK, and it took fucking 3 weeks. Anyway, but
it's such a long way away, the UK. That's why, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm blowing up a studio speaker. I'd find emotionally more sad than blowing up a venue speaker. Not because not because I don't own it, but it's I don't know. It's that's part of the gig, isn't it? Really, you know, when a sound system goes over the top.
What are you using at the moment, Luke? Are you still using the barefoot ones, or you have multiple sets? Okay.
Yeah, I've got
nice.
Barefoot MM12s.
Okay.
Which for me is they're the best monitor I've ever had. They really cover a lot of ground.
Right.
And I got other monitors, but they're when I come to judge something, whether it sounds right, and especially loud, then that's that they've really hit the spot for me. But I've been a monitor junkie for many years.
Right.
Yeah, and which is strange, because I'm sure, like a lot of people have been around a bit, that a lot of the early records were just written on NS10s, and that's the only speakers I had right through the first half of the 1990s.
Yeah.
It's a question for you guys. How long of a period do you find yourself testing tracks, and how many reference points or how many different monitors until you really feel like you can gauge, how comfortable you are with how it sounds? I mean, certainly you can't just go off of your own, but as well, like, how many different iterations of tries does it take for you to feel like, okay, this sounds proper and ready?
For me, not much at all, to be honest.
No, for me.
I mean, I mix when I mix a track, I mix it for on more on vibe than on sound. I make sure all the stuff sits nicely in relation to all the other stuff in the track. but and you know, I mean, I'm usually quite. I'm not really that scientific about it. You know, it's more like if it conveys the idea that I had. You know, even though there might be some stuff which is unconventional or not really not unconventional, but not really like perfect. I don't spend too much time, you know, slaving over that. You know, you know, I'm too impatient for that. You know, I'd rather start something new.
Did you say when you're testing tracks out? Yeah. There's a delay. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. I try to get like when you're testing stuff.
No, go. Okay.
I'll let you finish. Or okay. So when you're testing tracks out before release, is it more on the creative side, on the production, and sort of like you know, just what the track sounds like versus the mix that you're testing more? You know, is it the composition or is it the mix that you want to get a feel of when you're playing it out before a release?
Yeah, more the vibe and the atmosphere and the impact rather than the final sound. You know, to me, it's. I mean, you have to really tour with a track for weeks or even months to even understand how it sounds before you know, because you play in different sound system all the time. You know.
Yeah.
And unless you play in a club that you really know well and where you know the sound system really well, you can have that as a reference point. You know. But it doesn't really say too much, in my opinion, if a track sounds good in a club, a random club, you know. I mean, and the other thing is, once you are satisfied with the vibe and the idea, you know, whether your idea comes across, then I just keep it like that and leave it up to the person in the mastering stage to make it more industry standard and to shave off any, you know, things that are, you know, are not sticking to vinyl or which are, you know, unnecessary
or unwanted. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I get it to a certain stage, you know, where I'm happy with it, and then, you know, to really to make it perfect or make it so it sits in the range of other tracks. Well, that is more up to the mastering people, I think. So I don't really trust a club test too much, you know, because
you trust your own monitors,
it doesn't tell me.
You're aware of it more.
Yeah.
I think there's too much emphasis on perfectness, really.
Yeah.
But I think it's what is the purpose of what I'm doing. So if I'm writing a track that I want to play out used to play out in a DJ set, then that's where I want it to. That's where I want to be happy. You know, and that's kind of the end goal. And like Jochen was saying, personally, I don't faff around with stuff too much. It's the stuff that I know is not really important to what I'm trying to do. But you know, if you're writing something that's not for a club or a dance floor, I think there's a different way of thinking about it, because the purpose of that.
The purpose
is for different ears and different places and
different environments. Yeah,
that's a different goal, you know. So I think it depends, but I think fussing over things for too long can actually be very detrimental to creation.
It can kill a track.
Itself.
It can kill a track. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So record the shit version before you start messing around with it. Because you know, no, but it's happened. It's happened so much, you know.
Yeah, it's
like demos become the track because it just had this vibe, and you know and it's like gone if you don't capture it, you know, before you start tweaking it, and you know.
Yeah, usually when I get in that phase of okay, let's see if I can get some more out of it, I just save each tweak as a different version, you know, and then so you can always go back to what you had if you really mess it up. And then maybe take ideas from each version. And I mean, but to be honest, I don't spend that much time on it, you know. It's you know, it's really about the idea, you know. It's really about the thing you are setting out to do, you know, the sort of aha moment or the eureka moment when you are writing something and think, oh wow, this is amazing. That's where I try to keep it, you know, even when I might dress it up a little bit or change a little things around a little bit, but it's the moment where you are yourself getting excited about what you are hearing, and that's the vibe. That's the thing that you where you can, in theory, you could just stop there and then just iron out any technical imperfections or whatever, and then that's it. You know, that's usually what happens. You know.
Totally.
I mean, this is certainly true for working with computer sequencers, you know, like Ableton or Logic or Cubase or whatever. There's always the danger that you dive way too deep into it and just, you know, become like a it becomes like an office job, you know. You're just sitting behind a screen clicking around and nothing really changes, you know. It's all very, very small increments or very, very small little changes that don't really say anything about the initial idea. So I mean, if you
point. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
Go ahead. It's like I feel like I'm getting a delay. So no, but Luke's point about sort of perfection, you know, is really interesting from a mixing standpoint, because I do feel like at least now a lot of the things I've been hearing, like the pendulum is like set between two really extreme directions, where something is either really clean and it's too digital, or trying to attain a really older analog feel and overly distorted, but like sort of meeting a medium in between where it's like clean distortion, you know, and just like having a natural intent and not being on either end. You know, it's trickier, sure, but, you know, I think that I find even myself like challenging myself a lot, or I'm challenged rather a lot within those two extremes.
Where do you want to be?
Well, I
somewhere in the middle,
like a natural intent to whatever the track's intent is, right? And not getting it, like you said, overly perfect, because sound is not meant to be perfect, and neither is it meant to be like overly fabricated and overly distorted just for the sake of it sounding older, right? So
I think that's a bit of a fascination with 90s equipment and the way it sounded, to be honest, because that's a very common thing now, is the idea that somehow back in the 90s, the music, we weren't trying to get things as good as we could. A lot of time there's very limited equipment, so which kind of generated its own sound through lack of equipment. And I find it quite interesting that sound is actually a kind of a preset now. It's a kind of a type of sound that can be. You want that kind of raw, overdriven channel sound, you know, from back then. I think it's all good, but it's, you know, it's. I think the thinking behind then is not. I'm still doing the same thing now as I was doing then, but just with different equipment.
I mean, I think I know what you're saying, because a distorted kick sound in the early 90s was basically just overdrive your gain on your mixer, and then or maybe the gain of an effects, you know, processor, whatever, any preamp, whatever, and that is that's basically just using your equipment in a way that is not supposed to be used, you know. And I think that's what you are saying, Luke, by when you say, okay, I'm still doing the same thing what I did in the early 90s, is, you know, just try to explore, you know, the edges of what your gear can do, and sometimes you are within the limits of what it's supposed to do, but sometimes you are basically abusing it to get something out of it, which is
a bit
interesting
of abuse
as well. Yeah, exactly.
It's always good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Use things in any way you fancy using them, right? Not necessarily what they're made for. That's a good attitude to have, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see if there are any questions. What time is it now? Okay.
I think I'm going to have to clock off in a minute.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Time does go fast doing this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Well, we can just say, okay, we've covered everything for tonight, right? And then just go back to our gear.
Or lack thereof.
Or lack thereof, yeah, okay.
Back to isolation.
Back to isolation.
Yeah, back to isolation. Okay, guys.
Yeah, but we'll all be together again soon.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hang in there, and good luck surviving your week. Yeah, and it's really nice to speak to you all. And
you as well. And let's stay in touch.
Thank you.
Okay, for sure.
Okay then.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.